I'm on the air. I got to go. Bye.
You have a coaster right there.
Right.
Oh,
Welcome to Live from the Table, the official.
Go. Sorry.
I'm here with Noam Dwarman, the owner of the Comedy Cellar. Dan Natterman is in Vegas this week. And I'm Periel, the producer of the show. We are here with Michael Tracey, who is a journalist. You can visit his website at mtracey.net, and that is TRACEY.
correct. Thank you for emphasizing that, because you know what? There's a prominent Jewish American surname, Tracey, without an E. I happen to be Irish. I wish I were Jewish, because if I didn't have the Tracey without an E, then it wouldn't be misspelled so often.
Well, it's also hard to find because it's not the most uncommon name, right? So people, and as somebody who looks for people to reach out to as part of my job on the show, I sometimes email the wrong person.
Yeah, I went years being regularly confused with a guy called Mark Tracey.
Right.
You know who that is? He's like a journalist guy. I don't know. I remember I met a guy. I was talking to some other guy in media. He said, I thought for like 7 years that you were Mark Tracey.
That's so funny.
Anyway, it's okay.
Well,
I've done it before with big guests, and Noam, of course, becomes like irate with me. But then we had somebody on here who was like a really big guest, and he was like, that has happened to me many times, and I felt very vindicated.
I'll survive.
If your last name was Tracey, the Jewish one, we'd be calling you a self-hating Jew instead of an anti-Semite. So.
No, I'd be honored.
All right, let's so everything you ever. Oh, should we say something? We just found out that Charlie Kirk was shot and we believe has died.
Trump announced that he's dead, so.
So
did Blue Eye Ahmed.
I wish we had
been over that.
a source other than Donald Trump at the moment, but let's just presume that it's true. I don't know if you have any off the top of your head. Comment on what's happening, what's becoming of America.
I mean, it's a nightmare. Who knows what the recriminations would be? You know, I politically disagreed and like very much vehemently objected to Charlie Kirk, but this is just beyond the pale. So it's just terrible. I mean, what else can one say, really?
Yeah.
AP News.
Oh, AP. Okay. Yeah, I agree. It's. I made the analogy a couple weeks ago that...
especially because he was at a political function. He was in the middle of addressing a crowd on political topics, and then he's just shot out of the blue in the neck. It really kind of a vicious range, it seemed. We don't even know if the suspect has been apprehended, so it's just bad. And I think I worry how this could potentially be used to maybe disincentivize public political gatherings, which I think are really necessary in a thriving civic culture. And if now there's seen to be this ever-present threat lurking and people don't want to even take the risk, that's bad on an entirely different level.
Well, we're going to get to Epstein, but since you said that, I mean, my first comment was going to be that, as I've said, just like with global warming, when you have a macro trend, the temptation is to say that every hurricane is because of global warming, but of course that's not true, because there's always been huge weather events, and when you have an act of violence at a time when the climate is hot, it's very easy to draw the conclusion that the hot climate led to the violence. We don't ever really know that in any particular instance, but it sure does feel like it, right?
I do think that there's always a temptation, and people are always going to rush to declare that there's something unique to this political moment or climate that has a causal relationship to why this happened, or to when Trump was shot. And then when people looked into the Trump would-be assassin, nobody could even decipher what that guy's political motive was, if he had any. It seemed like he also Googled Biden potentially to assassinate if he had been in proximity to him in Pennsylvania. So I think people should really not rush to conclusions. And also, remember, in the 1970s, Gerald Ford got shot twice in the span of like a month.
Right.
And did it have something to do with the political climate? Sure, but that's always like a very vague thing to really nail down with any tangibility. So I don't know. I'm always a little bit reluctant to, especially assign blame to anyone, and especially barring any information which, as we're talking now, has not been forthcoming about who the suspect was or what have you.
So, and I worry about it for myself sometimes when I'm daydreaming, because I get some very, very nasty mail sometimes, calling me a Nazi and a this and a that.
I've gotten a ton, ironically, just this morning, every now and then, I get death threats a lot. But every now and then, they're so goofy that I'll just post them just to sort of, ridicule them or whatever. And I post it. I've gotten much more lately. Mm-hmm. But I posted one just like maybe an hour or two before this news even came out. And yeah, sometimes they can be funny, and like 99.9% of the time, I'm not inclined to take them that seriously. They're just like online chatter. But at the same time, it's not pleasant to be inundated with people who are calling for your murder.
You just never know. All right. Everything you ever wanted to know about Jeffrey Epstein, but were afraid to ask. We have with us,
Fear not.
I would say, dare I say, the world's leading Jeffrey Epstein expert at the moment. I don't believe there's anybody more well-versed in the minutia, the gory, enticing details of the Jeffrey Epstein story than our guest, Michael Tracey.
Not a title I ever consciously sought.
No.
But I suppose a duty that I feel obliged to.
So now I want to make this chock full of information for our listeners. This is a story which I have never delved deeply into because my gut was always that I'm sure he did something awful, but the entire edifice of conspiracy theories around it, I just decided wasn't true because these things to me are never true. The analogy I always give is that Benjamin Netanyahu has like 4 people alone with him in the war room of the Israeli government, and he's deciding life and death, survival or not survival decisions for the state of Israel. And 36 hours later, it leaks out to the press. He can't keep it a secret, but somehow dozens or hundreds of people who would have to know bits and pieces of this Jeffrey Epstein conspiracy, the Mossad, the CIA, all this
And
stuff.
there's not even one. It's a million different theories.
And not a single person comes forward with any information. I just call bullshit on that. But however, let's just start this way. Mm-hmm. First, tell us what is true about it. Let's divide into 3 categories. Sure. What we know is true. What we don't know is true, but it does seem a little suspicious that he gave all this money for tax advice, things like that, things which a reasonable person might think that there's smoke there that might actually be a fire, and what is just unfounded nonsense, conspiratorial gibberish. So let's start with what is true about the Jeffrey Epstein story.
So my elevator pitch, because as you might imagine, I'm constantly peppered with questions about this now.
Yeah.
And hey, I bring it on myself, so I'm not going to complain. But often one of the first questions I'm asked is some variation of this. Like, okay, so what then did he do? Or give me like your master theory. I'm not really that interested in proffering like a huge master theory. I feel like that's almost what leads to the proliferation of a lot of these unfounded theories. Like people think they can just declare authoritatively, like, here's what happened, right? And with very complex events and phenomena, which the Epstein thing has most certainly become, I'm wary of people who think that they're in a position to just reduce it to a couple of pithy.
Well, what was he?
I'll get.
What was he convicted of?
Sure. I'll get.
What did he plead down from that we think he?
Yeah, right, exactly. So the way I've been sort of encapsulating it is, my contention now is that approximately 90% of what people think they confidently believe about the whole Epstein story is more or less BS. So either wildly exaggerated, distorted in some way, corrupted by confirmation bias, or just in some cases outright fictitious. And that's compounded by a huge number of factors that we should get into, including the journalistic malfeasance around this story, which has been a huge aspect of why I've been interested. Yeah.
What's true?
I gotcha. So 90% is basically BS, but there's 10% that is, I would say, roughly true, and that relates primarily to a period in the early 2000s, so roughly 2002 to 2005, and it has to do with what I've taken to calling the Palm Beach phase of the Epstein saga. So he had this estate or house in Palm Beach, and there was a period when he had teenage girls of roughly the same age. Some were at or above the legal age of consent in Florida, which is 18.
As young as?
I'll get to it.
Okay.
Florida happens to have like one of the highest ages of consent in the entire world. Now, I've been joking. I'm not ordinarily a huge age of consent guy in that I'm not like deeply studying the intricacies of age of consent laws, just as like out of personal interest. But unfortunately, it is like a relevant legal factor here that you have to like be apprised of.
I used to know them all, by the way.
Yeah, know them by heart, right? I mean, it is interesting if this happened in Palm Beach, Georgia, so one state north, rather than Palm Beach, Florida, it'd be much different legally. Anyway, so he had a constant parade in this period of teenage girls who, in many cases, were recruiting one another to come to the house and give a massage of varying degrees of sexualization.
But what's the youngest age that we...
So this whole thing was kicked off with a Palm Beach police investigation that was prompted by an incident involving a 14-year-old.
Okay.
So sometimes you'll see it reported that the 14-year-old was like so shaken by her experience that she ran to her mother, and then the mother called the police. That's not what happened. What happened was this 14-year-old was recruited by another 14-year-old who actually, and the one who recruited her was actually one of the people at, I'm almost positive, again, sometimes like there's so much information here, I sometimes need to double check, but I'm almost positive that the person who recruited that 14-year-old was one of the so-called survivors at this Epstein press conference last week in Washington, D.C. that I attended, and we should get into that if you're interested.
As a spectator, you attended.
Well, as an interloper or a trespasser, even though I was literally invited by the organizer, Rokana. But anyway, we'll get into it. So the 14-year-old ends up being brought to Epstein's house by another girl who's slightly older, who seemingly advises this girl to either not tell Epstein her age or lie about the age, and she gives conflicting stories. And it's not even clear if this particular 14-year-old, engaged in any real sexual acts. It did seem like she probably stripped down to her underwear, and maybe participated in a massage with another girl kind of leading the massage. But in terms of like an overt sex act, not clear if it even happened, because Epstein was never charged with anything in relation to this girl because there was conflicting evidence.
Wait, I'm sorry to interrupt you because
sure.
I've seen a lot of interviews and time goes fast, and I want to make it, like I said, chock full of information. So
Yeah, sure.
if you could just tell me, and then the explanation, like he definitely molested, or whatever you want to call it, 10 women, 20 women, no women.
Okay. So here's what we know for certain, insofar as we can know anything by virtue of his guilty plea that he did enter in Florida. Mm-hmm. Right? So there was this Palm Beach investigation that started in 2005. He was then indicted by a Palm Beach grand jury in 2006. And then there was a federal intercession into what had at that point been a local state-level prosecution that was overseen by Aosta, who is part of the lore now, but he was the U.S. attorney for the Southern District of Florida. His office interceded in that local Palm Beach case because the local police in Palm Beach, particularly this detective called Joe Ricari, was disenchanted with how the local Palm Beach district attorney was handling the case. Because when Epstein was indicted on a state level in July of 2006, he was indicted for essentially a prostitution charge that related to adults primarily, and so the local police were upset about that, and they wanted the feds to intercede, which they did. And then there was this whole convoluted process involving the introduction of a non-prosecution agreement, meaning non-prosecution for federal charges. And pursuant to that non-prosecution agreement,
Michael,
I know I got you.
What did he do?
I'm getting to
you
it.
can say it first, and then tell me.
No, but you need a little bit of context, right?
No.
So then, pursuant to the non-prosecution agreement, Epstein was compelled to plead guilty to 2 state-level charges in Florida. One of them was felony solicitation of prostitution, which relates to adults, and a second one that was added at the behest of the feds was procuring a person under 18 for prostitution, right? So then that almost certainly related, because, and I say almost certainly because if you go look at the transcripts and such, names are redacted, so you have to like cross-check things and draw inferences. It's very annoying. I wish they would unredact every record, but they keep a lot redacted to supposedly protect the privacy of victims, which I think is no longer tenable given the outsized political and legal significance of this case. But anyway, that almost certainly related to a 17-year-old who testified to the grand jury in Florida, gave an interview to the police, and she says, this 17-year-old, that she had consensual intercourse, which was unusual for Epstein based on what I can gather, in that he typically did not have full-blown intercourse, but he did in this instance, and it was with a 17-year-old who said that this literally happened the day before her 18th birthday. And she was asked by the police detective, was this consensual? She says yes. Now, I'm not opining on whether that's correct. I think it's definitely inadvisable. I think Jeffrey Epstein was morally culpable for even getting into this whole situation where there was, girls of uncertain ages, or he's not checking diligently whether they're 18, or even if they lied, it doesn't particularly matter for a man in his 50s who doesn't have to be doing this. I mean, it did suggest a pathology on his part. He was pathologically obsessed with constantly getting massages, which is bizarre. But anyway, we know that he pleaded guilty to procuring person under 18 for prostitution in Florida. So that was admitted by him. So we know that to be the case.
But what is the story about, dozens of victims in that case?
I got you. Yeah. Okay.
Let me ask you a yes or no question first.
Sure.
Before you.
What, am I under interrogation here?
No, yeah.
Am I on the stand now?
Did he engage in erotic massages with multiple underage women, as far as you understand?
I would say yes.
You would say yes. Okay.
Erotic, but
happy
again,
ending massage.
50-something-year-olds should not be engaging in erotic massages, whatever gradation of eroticism.
Happy endings.
Well, it's happy end. He often, sorry to get graphic,
please.
But he for the most part would, in these massages, based on what I can understand, is he would masturbate himself.
What the hell's the matter with you? Shut up.
So when you say happy ending, right?
Take it easy.
But not always.
Not always.
But yeah, I think yes. I mean, that is pretty clear.
Mm-hmm.
With the girls in the room.
Yeah.
Like that's
yes.
never happened to you.
Moi?
So yes. I mean, I think that is true. But when you talk about whoever was 30 or 50 victims from this Palm Beach case, so that relates to a weird quirk in how the government had to approach this, because there was something called the Crime Victims' Rights Act, right, which was passed in 2004, and it becomes very much relevant in terms of how this now even manifests today, which seemingly required, or was argued that it required, the government to notify whom it had designated as victims but had not been formally adjudicated as such in any kind of adversarial process, that they were pursuing a plea agreement with Epstein, or a non-prosecution agreement. Now, it's not even clear what the government's obligations were in that stage. However, they did identify what they claimed to be this sort of universe of victims, separate and apart from the particular victim that Epstein pleaded guilty to having procured for prostitution.
Right.
So, but there were problems even with that. Like, there was an instance where somebody whom the government had identified as a victim and received a victim notification letter denied that she was a victim. Some of these supposed victims wanted to exonerate Epstein.
Okay, but what we do know for sure is that he engaged in illegal acts with underage girls, and if there's problems with some of the cases, we believe that there is a number of cases which were legit. He didn't plead guilty thinking that he was innocent. Let me just do a year and a half in prison because I didn't do anything, right? He knew, and normally when somebody pleads guilty, that's in return for the fact that a certain number of the charges get dropped in some way. So he was guilty and he belonged in jail. Now, so that we know that part is true.
Yeah, but how long did he belong in jail for the offenses specified?
Yeah. So the next question is that I want to know whether it's true or not. Did he have, and what is the evidence of him? We know that he had all these relationships with Bill Gates and Alan Dershowitz and the Prince this and and Larry Summers and who's who.
Yeah.
Did he have cameras around his premises where he filmed people having sex and blackmailed them?
Well, here's the thing. I mean, this gets to the online folklore around this stuff. Yeah. Some of the claim that he had every room wired, right, where he had secret cameras to capture prominent individuals in sexually compromising situations. Those claims seem to primarily originate with probably two of the alleged victims who are just out of their mind batshit. Mm-hmm. So one of them is Maria Farmer, who, parades around as though she's the original Epstein victim or accuser. She was literally 26 when she says that she voluntarily climbed into bed with Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein at Leslie Wexner's compound in Ohio.
And Leslie Wexner is?
He was one of the richest men in the United States. He gave Epstein famously power of attorney. He owned Victoria's Secret, The Limited, and other sort of women's clothing retailers, but he also had many other business holdings.
So he's the kind of guy who probably wouldn't have any way to meet attractive young women without Jeffrey Epstein to help him.
Well, I mean, it's speculated that he could have been gay. I don't know if that's true. Who knows? I mean, I actually, it would make sense to me if he was gay. I mean, he had a wife technically, but I don't know.
So go ahead.
Yeah, so
the
this woman, Maria,
the cameras around. That's
this
one
woman, Maria Farmer, right, who is a lunatic, and she's actually, as of May of this year, suing the federal government, the U.S. federal government, for $600 million as part of like some putative class action lawsuits claiming that she endured like 30 years of psychic turmoil, depression, PTSD. She claims that she was given at least 2 cancers by Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, and also Donald Trump and Bill Clinton. Who knows what the hell she's even talking about? It's a crazy person, okay? But she never had her credibility like examined at all. Mm-hmm. Even like not for like these alt media people, I call them podcast creatures now. They were just totally credulous about her, and we can get into more specifics.
No, we got to move because
I know.
The next one,
but a lot of the
she's
claims
one
originating
woman,
from,
and the other one.
Yeah, and the other one is this woman, Sarah Ransom, also a full-fledged adult at the time that she encountered Epstein, and she gave a deposition, and she was asked by the lawyers deposing her, like, what did you do for a living when you first came to New York City at age 21 or 22? I think it was 22. What did you do to make a living? She says, what I would do was I would, through an agency, which I guess is a modeling agency because she's an aspiring model, but she didn't specify. How would you make money? I would be asked to meet gentlemen for dinner, and I would get $1,500. And she said on occasion I would have consensual sex with these gentlemen because she found them attractive. So then one thing led to another, and she encountered Epstein's like organization, and she did fly to the island in the Virgin Islands and so forth. But anyway, she had a mental breakdown essentially. She tried to commit suicide a few times, definitely troubled person. And in 2016, she started emailing this woman, Maureen Callahan, journalist of the New York Post, saying, hey, I'm an Epstein victim. I have these sex tapes on Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, Prince Andrew, and Richard Branson. And my mission is to make sure that, quote unquote, pedophile Trump, neither Trump nor Hillary Clinton, whom she called that evil bitch Hillary, get elected president. And I alone can make sure that neither get elected because I have sex tapes that implicate them somehow, beginning with Bill Clinton or Trump himself, right? And so she was in communications with this New York Post journalist. And one thing leads to another, she admits that she made the whole thing up. She had no sex tapes. And she's the one who, like, people just assume must be a credible source for this claim that every house was wired. Now, the New York Times last month did publish an article in Epstein's New York house from around, it seems, 2019, when Epstein was indicted after having been federally charged and then arrested. And it does seem to show like some surveillance cameras in some rooms in the house, but it's not clear like when they might have been installed. Ghislaine Maxwell, in her proffer interview with the Deputy Attorney General from July that came out just like 2 or 3 weeks ago, she denies adamantly that there were cameras like systematically installed anywhere. I haven't seen any systematic proof that, or any evidence that they were installed in the Virgin Islands house, in like private areas, like I don't know, a bedroom or a bathroom or something, in the New Mexico ranch that Epstein owned, in the Palm Beach house, except for in the Palm Beach house, Epstein did install a surveillance camera like around his work desk because one of his staff had stolen from him, and the police came in and installed a surveillance camera for him after that incident. It was like I think that was in 2003.
Well, plenty of people have cameras. The question is, was he? Okay. Well, so Melinda Gates, as I understand it,
now we're on to Melinda Gates.
Well, it's related to this. Melinda Gates felt that her husband Bill was up to sexual no good with Jeffrey Epstein. It doesn't mean young girl.
Give me the quote. Give me the quote where she said it.
Well, I'm
because people make this claim all the time, but I feel like they're sort of like muddling things.
She notes that Epstein's friendship with Bill was one of the reasons she knew the marriage was irreparable. I did not. Where is it?
I don't buy it.
You don't buy it.
No, I mean I've seen that interview. If it's the same interview that you're referring to,
I hope this is not. I just Googled now.
Yeah.
ChatGPT. The New York Times published a deeply disturbing article that raised serious questions about Bill's conduct. Questions that suggested this is Melinda talking, suggested he had betrayed not only our marriage, but also my values.
Okay, but this is while they're in the midst of a divorce, right?
Yes.
Okay, I mean, the interview that I've seen with Melinda Gates is she's asked about the Epstein thing and Bill's relationship with Epstein, and she says, "Oh, yeah, that was a factor." I don't buy that it was like I've heard people claim, I was even on a podcast, a few days ago where somebody says, "What do you mean, Melinda Gates?" Or like, that was the reason why they got divorced. I don't think that's been established at all. I mean, I just think, it's something you can kind of backfill to justify whatever led to the dissolution of the relationship. But sure, I mean, yeah, Bill Gates was an associate of Epstein post Epstein's entry of a guilty plea in Florida in 2008, and then he served his term of incarceration in Florida until 2009. So it's like a 13-month sentence, essentially, where he was in the custody of the Palm Beach Sheriff's Office. So June of 2008 to July of 2009. And, among the prominent people that he did meet with after that time period was Bill Gates. So I think, if I were divorcing one of the wealthiest men on earth and I wanted like the most money possible, I would maybe cite the purported relationship with Jeffrey Epstein to
I'm going to find
enhance my argument.
Yeah, I'm going to find the clip from her memoirs and I'll put it into the video.
Okay.
So now you tell us about this. So I'm just trying to, and then we're going to get to this stuff that I think is really crazy.
Sure.
So you have these people that surrounded him. There is some inkling there. I mean, Melinda Gates could just be like really inexcusably just smearing her husband here.
Well, no, he did have a relationship with Epstein. That's true.
Yeah. But then you do have, and tell us about this, you have these guys. Who's the guy from Apollo who gave him 150?
Leon Black?
Yeah, tell that, sir. Because this does make one wonder what's going on here. Did Epstein have something over on these guys? Now, again, I'm just going to say, I'm sure you would say it too, that doesn't mean that these guys were there with underage girls. It could just be enough that they're with hookers, right? It could be like men
or
will
even just
pay,
women. They don't have to be full-fledged hookers.
or just
like
women.
Sex workers.
Yeah, Epstein did like to have in the New York house. So you got to sort of distinguish somewhat. In the Palm Beach situation, it did end up including at least some girls who were of like lower socioeconomic status. There's some notorious stories of like girls recruiting other girls who might have like lived in a trailer park or had like unstable family lives. But in the New York situation, which is a little bit distinct, Epstein did like to have, and Michael Wolff, the journalist, talks about this because he visited this house and, maybe
he's not considered completely reliable, Michael Wolff.
Not in every instance, but like he did, like it is true that he had this relationship with Epstein. He says that he introduced Steve Bannon and Jeffrey Epstein, and I think he's right. I mean, I think that's proven by the evidence. He has audio recordings of Epstein that he took. So he's not just like totally making stuff up here. But yeah, you should use your critical thinking to maybe vet some of the stuff that he says. But for the most part, at least when it comes to Epstein, I think he's on the mark in terms of what he reports. But Wolf talks about how Epstein at the New York house, and it was like the biggest. And I totally understand why people were so intrigued by this, because the guy Epstein did have what was the largest private residence in Manhattan. It was basically a mansion, and there are no mansions in Manhattan, pretty much, right? But he had one, or he had the biggest private residence, and it's and what Epstein would do was he was given it by Wexner, who was the previous owner of that house. And on the Upper East Side, and what Epstein would do was he would like to have younger women who were attractive, who would just kind of like be sort of like background decorations, right? And it would be like sort of a gentleman's club. Like every now and then there would be a woman who would come to one of his soirees, which was sort of like an idiosyncratic woman, right? For the most part, it was men. And they would be sort of adorned with these younger, attractive women who would just like be answering the door or serving drinks or some stuff like that, right? But those women tended to be like, they weren't, they were more sophisticated young women, right? They weren't like trailer park types who like came from unstable lives for the most part. I'm just generalizing. Like in other words, they knew what they were doing, and it wasn't clear that they were like necessarily always just like outright prostituting themselves at every instance.
But sometimes they were.
I can't think of a specific instance when in the New York house that happened. It's possible. It's possible. I mean, people just like, that's the thing. People just make logical leaps based on their suppositions
Right.
on this stuff. And I want to be really tethered to the evidence, which I know is a really controversial thing to want to do. But I think it's actually pretty necessary, because otherwise people get so ahead of themselves or beyond their skis and just like propounding these theories based on what they assume must have been proven true at some point, but really hasn't when you dig into the details.
Right, but we do need to have some explanation why people were giving this man
Okay, so Leon Black,
millions
right?
of dollars.
Yeah, I got you. So in early 2021, an accounting firm, I'm not sure if it was Deloitte, I forget the firm, but it was hired by Leon Black to audit essentially his relationship with Epstein. And they submitted the report to the SEC. So you can't lie on that unless you want to get yourself in legal hot water. I don't necessarily claim that it's fully comprehensive or like there's no information that might have been excluded theoretically. But in terms of what's in that report, and it's, anybody can go search for it. Epstein was hired by Leon Black as a money manager, just as he sort of had these like these services for rarefied wealthy people, extremely high net worth people, such as Wexner, such as Leon Black, who was a billionaire hedge fund guy, such as Elizabeth Johnson, who was an heiress to the Johnson & Johnson family fortune, and one or two others. And what is reported in this report is that Epstein saved Leon Black like over $100 million, I think, on tax avoidance, essentially, or other tactics that he had to save these guys money. Because when he was at Bear Stearns, right, in the late 70s or early 80s, as a relatively young man, he rose quickly through Bear Stearns. I think there's some evidence, even if you look at his birthday book, that he really was sort of like a math prodigy. He taught math, obviously, at that private school, Dalton, in Manhattan. But he sort of like innovated like novel tactics to save money for high net worth individuals. And I'm not like a Wall Street guy, so I can't give you like full.
So this was some percentage. He saved him a couple $1 billion.
Well, Leon in this report. It says he saved Leon Black over $100 million, and so he got a percentage.
Yeah, but if he gave him 160, he gave him $100 million, right? Leon Black gave Epstein over $100 million.
I'm not sure what amount Leon Black gave Epstein, but whatever it was, it would have been a lot. And same with Wexner, right? Alan Dershowitz says that he was told by Epstein, that Epstein got 1% of Leon Black's revenues, or however you characterize the income, given the services that Epstein provided as a money manager. Now, Wexner was one of the wealthiest people in the United States. He had like a fortune of like 8 or 9 billion, I think. So do the arithmetic. That adds up to a lot, even if it's just 1%, right? Especially in cumulatively. So look, I mean, I'm all for if it were possible, if I could snap my fingers, and we can have a full forensic audit about Epstein accumulated every penny of his wealth, I would snap my fingers in a split second. But I think a lot of people who are invested in the sort of more fantastical narratives here point to Epstein's wealth as like this total mystery, as if there's no information about it whatsoever, and that's just not true. Now, is it incomplete information? Sure. Is it? I think it's probable that he stored some money overseas or whatever. But when he was arrested in 2019, right, in terms of these bail hearings, he had to report his income, or his lawyers had to report his income for him, or his net worth, and it was around. It was reported to at that time to be around $600 million. Ton of money, sure, but
so
he wasn't a billionaire.
This says here that Black paid Epstein $158 million. It says Black and Epstein maintained that the fees were tied to real financial value delivered. Indeed, Black believed Epstein's ideas ultimately saved him at least $1 billion and possibly over $2 billion in taxes. If true, one might argue, okay, that's 10 or 15%. It seems hard to believe, right? But
well,
maybe.
Why? I mean,
why? That seems
I
totally not
mean,
hard to believe.
what?
Like he gave him this house because he saved him $2 billion.
Yeah, he gave him the house essentially in lieu of monetary remuneration.
Mm-hmm. How much is that house in New York worth?
A lot. I don't know the exact figure, but a shitload.
I mean, what's hard for me to believe is that somebody who works at one of the biggest hedge funds, most important hedge funds in the world, that anybody could have cracked the code of investment such that they could make themselves so much more valuable as a money manager than anybody else on earth. I know Warren Buffett wouldn't believe that were true. These guys, they don't believe anybody has that kind of knowledge.
It wasn't limited to Epstein investment knowledge, though.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at
tax avoidance.
Thank God to Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche for going to interview Ghislaine Maxwell for the first time, because Maxwell says that on, I think it was July 22nd of this year, it was the first time, she says, I think credibly, that she had ever been asked by any government official or law enforcement official or what have you to describe her role, Maxwell's role, in what we're being told was the most prolific child sex trafficking ring in American history and world history. Who knows at this point? But she hadn't been asked to describe her role in it by any government authority until July of 2025. Imagine that.
And you maintain there was no child sex trafficking ring.
Well, I only brought that up because she talks about what she observed in terms of Epstein's business activities, including on behalf of Wexner and Leon Black and others. And she says that, for instance, Epstein restructured financially Wexner's entire business portfolio. What does that mean exactly? I don't know. I'm not a business guy, but it seems like pretty complex work potentially. He drafted, he basically oversaw Epstein's staff and Wexner's staff in terms of, that worked on his houses or his other holdings or whatever. He ran Epstein's. No, I keep screwing up the surnames. Epstein ran Wexner's property developments in Ohio. There was a country club that Wexner owned in Ohio that Epstein sort of ran the finances for. He drafted the trust funds for Wexner's children.
So you're making the case that you think it's that it could be plausible that Wexner would have thought that Epstein was worth this amount of money.
And that's what Maxwell says. Mm-hmm. Now, is she the most credible person on earth? I'm not even arguing that. I'm just saying that, it's nice to finally get information from somebody who's been accused of all these heinous crimes that has been totally missing from any of the popular narrative for this entire time, which is informed, and the popular narrative is informed virtually exclusively by the claims of extortionist lawyers like Bradley Edwards and David Boies. Bradley Edwards, whom I tried to ask a question at this DC press conference last week, and these chronic fabricating accusers such as Virginia Roberts Gouffre and others, and delusional maniacs like Maria Farmer or Sarah Ransom, etc.
Could it be something as informal as a follower? And then we'll get to the conspiracy theories. You hang out with a lot of important people. You get drunk. They're hanging out. They let their guard
Epstein
down.
didn't drink.
Whatever.
He's a health freak.
They do. And Trump doesn't drink either, right? And anyway, you're hanging out. You let the guard down. There's a lot of beautiful women around. Eventually, a certain number of them succumb to temptation and have sex with prostitutes or just women. And now they know that you know. I know that Jeffrey knows what I did. Now Jeffrey wants to do business with me. He never has to mention, unless you say this, I'll tell you why. And a wise person who these people are, who know not to take chances unnecessarily, say, yeah, I probably should. Let me just do this with Jeffrey. Why would I risk the fact that he has things over on me? He doesn't need to spell it out. Is that a possible scenario?
So that sounds superficially plausible.
Uh-huh.
But so this guy, Bradley Edwards, who was basically Epstein's most strident, long-time legal nemesis, who ran essentially as the MC this press conference in D.C. last week, which we're told Thomas Massey, who was the co-organizer, said this was the biggest press conference in D.C. in at least 5 years. But Bradley Edwards, the lawyer, was running it. And I'm now deep enough into this whole crap that I have actually read Bradley Edwards' book. Okay? It's called Relentless Pursuit. Anybody can go look it up if they'd like. It was from 2020.
Do you have a bedroom with like photos hanging in lines?
I'm the Charlie Day meme, right? Like I'm dot connecting everything. So Bradley Edwards' book came out in 2020. It's called Relentless Pursuit. And toward the end of the book, he addresses these theories that he says are very widespread about Epstein supposedly running a blackmail operation of some kind. And this guy would be the last person on earth to admit anything that was absolving of Jeffrey Epstein, okay? And he says over the course of his incredibly intensive engagement with Epstein over the course of a decade, he has never seen any evidence that Epstein ever engaged in blackmail. So that's what this Bradley Edwards guy says, who's now running Epstein survivor press conferences in front of the U.S. Capitol. So I'll just defer to him. I'll cite him. That's what he says. And so now, what did your sort of hypothesis, does it sort of like strike people as, again, superficially plausible? Sure, but I need evidence, and there is none.
Right. Okay. Now, from that, a picture of a wealthy guy who's got his hooks in a lot of other wealthy people, and obviously charismatic and a bit of a con man. We've heard stories like this before. Maybe a little Madoff mixed into him, and sex and all that, and criminal activity. That's an interesting story as an isolated story. However, now we come to the accusations that he's also a CIA agent, that all this sexual stuff was actually done on behalf of the CIA, and then for the real aficionados.
Mossad is what I think people really
for the real
most vehement.
For the real gourmet connoisseurs of this stuff, it comes to the Jews. This is a delicacy.
It all comes
Jeffrey
back.
Epstein is a rare delicacy, but let's get to the Jews last, and your friend Martyr made. So,
oh boy,
was Jeffrey Epstein? Is there any evidence that Jeffrey Epstein was a CIA honeypot operation?
Okay, so here's where that theory comes from.
Yeah.
Ghislaine Maxwell's father, Robert Maxwell, was like a media baron. He was it the Daily Mirror, the Daily Record? I think it was the Daily Mirror, but I might be mixing up UK newspapers. That he bought, I think it was in the 80s. And so see, when I don't know a fact for sure, I will qualify what I say. These guys like
Ariel's exactly the opposite, but go ahead.
Okay, but these guys like Martyr Maid, these other charlatans. And Darryl Cooper, if you ever hear this, you are a charlatan. I mean, you're like such a crybaby. It's unbelievable. But he just will state facts as though he can authoritatively substantiate them, which he clearly can't. But we'll get to that. And
I admonished Matthew Cockrell for calling somebody a charlatan. So I just wanted to say, but
no, he's a charlatan for sure.
All right, okay.
And a crybaby. I will stick to that. And
I'll stipulate the crybaby. Go ahead.
So yeah, he's like Anyway, so people will make a logical leap that because Robert Maxwell, who it is pretty well proven was involved in trafficking arms to Israel in the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, what the Israelis call the War of Independence, or the Arabs will call the Palestinians will call the Nakba, etc. It is pretty well founded that Robert Maxwell, trafficked arms from then Czechoslovakia, which is his ethnic heritage, to Israel for use in that war. So that's okay, fine. And then he became a benefactor of the state of Israel.
What does that mean, benefactor?
Well, he funded you know what? I'm not 100% sure. I think it's assumed that I think it's plausible that he funded like pro-Israel or pro-Jewish whatever.
Plant a lot of trees.
Yeah, I mean, so he was involved. There's a story about how there was this guy. I think I know who it was, but I'm not even going to say the name because I'm not 100% sure. Who basically was leaking Israeli nuclear secrets in the 1980s, and Robert Maxwell caught wind of it.
Pollard?
No, it wasn't Pollard. I think it was Ben Menashe, actually.
Oh, okay. But he's considered to be also an unreliable character.
Well, I mean, I think he was, I think he was seen to have reliably potentially had information about Israel's nuclear program in the 80s, but then he's made a whole living on like.
But what is true? When he was buried, this part is true.
In the Mount of Olives, yes, in a next East.
Who's who of important Israeli patriots showed up to his funeral, right?
Sure. So he's buried in the Mount of Olives, and I would say a next East Jerusalem. Let's not debate that, but he's buried in the same. He was given an honorary burial. Just as Sheldon Adelson was. So Sheldon Adelson for years was the top Republican donor in the United States.
Owner of the Venetian
casino magnate, and also
Las
Macau,
Vegas.
Las Vegas. And he was a multi-billionaire. He was hardcore pro-Israel.
And huge Trump donor.
Yeah, and now Miriam Adelson, his wife, is carrying the torch. And when Sheldon Adelson died in early 2021, he died in Malibu, California, right? And they flew his body to Israel, or they flew it to to East Jerusalem for an honorary burial in the same burial spot. I wish when I was in East Jerusalem, I went to go visit it. But
If you spoke more nicely about them, they might invite you. And
they have. I've been.
And did Adelson have all these important figures show up?
Yeah. Netanyahu went.
So what you're saying is that there's no reason to think he was Mossad. He could.
Well, no, I'm sure he had some connections to the Israeli state. I mean, sure. Was he like an active Mossad agent? I don't think he had to even be an active Mossad agent, right? Like, he clearly had an affinity.
Did you say massage agent or Mossad agent?
Well, you know what? Now I'm crossing our themes here. Mossad. Did the Mossad perform massages? Maybe.
Well, we skipped over the CIA. So let's start with the Mossad first. So Maxwell's, Ghislaine Maxwell's dad may or may not have been definitely connected. Maybe Mossad, maybe Mossad adjacent.
Sure.
Maybe
and
Mossad.
somehow from that we're supposed to believe.
And he died seemingly mysteriously in 1991. He was on his yacht.
So therefore, his
And
daughter
he was found, in the water.
His daughter has a relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Somehow that means Jeffrey Epstein must be Mossad.
Right. I mean, I think it's sort of silly for people to just extrapolate that because somebody's father might have been at least Mossad adjacent or Israel connected or whatever, that means that his youngest daughter must have been. I mean, it's possible, but you need to have some evidence, and there is really none.
Well, there's certain glib observations I would make, which is if I'm the head of the Mossad and I actually want to engage Jeffrey Epstein in this sophisticated honeypot scheme to get, I don't even know, Bill Clinton on tape, I'm going to tell him, take it easy, dude. We don't need you running all over town advertising the fact.
We don't need you having high school girls, get transported to your Palm Beach house. I mean, that might blow our cover, right?
So this is a little bit reckless in terms of the way
he was reckless. Thank God Ghislaine Maxwell did that proffer interview finally with Todd Blanche. Todd Blanche, if you're out there, thank you for this interview. Because she gives really interesting information that makes a lot of sense, which is that she says around the late 90s or early 2000s, so sort of coinciding with what I'm calling this Palm Beach phase of the Epstein saga, she says she observed Epstein ingesting or taking what she regarded to be disturbingly high doses of testosterone, which physiologically, it would make sense that would have made him maybe more reckless, impulsive, obviously higher sex drive.
Well, I have that naturally, and I'll tell you, it's very difficult to control.
Maybe I'll look into it for myself, but because I'm clearly following in Epstein's footsteps. Oh, it's a joke, people. We're at the Comedy Cellar. So yeah, I mean that's definitely that's definitely useful context to understand what potentially went on here with Epstein in that particular phase. But
now CIA. Now
CIA. So
this
I
is
don't know
one.
if there's been ever.
This is one that
I'll give you one. Yeah.
And then I want to get to his suicide or his
Sure.
murder. This is one that I did look into years ago, and it was really the beginning and the end of my.
I'm sweating because I'm so passionate about the subject.
So there was this, and I'll let you fill in the details, but there was this reporter who claims, some hearsay, that Aosta, who was whatever his position was, claimed that the reason he gave Epstein his sweetheart deal was because he was told Epstein was intelligence.
Yeah. So
and then this is, and everybody should know what I'm about to say. And this goes to, I don't even want to name names, I feel bad, but people I know, people I'm friends with. No. People.
No, I mean, we have to name names at this point because I'm sorry, if we don't, then there's just total impunity for just a total detachment from any factual standards about anything.
Journalists all around who talk about this, they know very well that there was an Office of Professional Responsibility.
I don't think they did know until recently, until I told them in many cases.
Well, I've told people, and they still don't mention it, which looked into this. They questioned Aosta. Aosta denied having said it, denied any knowledge, and they even offered him a top secret forum where presumably he could say anything he wants, a skiff, right? And he still said, no, there's no need for that.
Well, we don't know. So I have FOIA, the DOJ. People tell me, you don't want the Epstein files? What's wrong with you? No, I want more. I want
FOIA's Freedom of Information Act. Just for
I want So explain to the woman who might not be familiar. Sorry. We're at the Comedy Cellar. I respect women. I cherish women like Donald Trump. So I've been sending freedom of information requests to a bunch of different agencies, state and federal and local, actually, for the maximum amount of even possible Epstein files. I want them all,
of course.
So that's why I'm against this Massey Kana bill, which maybe we should talk about, because it includes these exceptions or excuses that the federal government, the DOJ and FBI, can use to continue withholding or redacting a huge array of potential Epstein files on the basis of either protecting the privacy rights of purported victims, many of whom are full of shit or fake, and then also on national security grounds or related to U.S. foreign policy. Really, what's the nexus with U.S. foreign policy or national security with Jeffrey Epstein?
Any evidence that Epstein could have been involved in the CIA?
Not that I know of.
Nothing.
I mean, anything's possible.
No.
Okay. So he did meet with William Burns. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Who was a former,
he was under Biden. He was the CIA director.
He wrote the Niet memo, or the
yeah. In 2008, he was the U.S. ambassador to Russia under George W. Bush, and he said, infamously that Ukraine is a red line for Russians across the political spectrum, not just Putin, and he was sort of advising the Bush administration at the time not to encroach on what
Niet means Niet. That's what it was called.
Yeah. Not to encroach on what Russia perceives to be its sphere of influence, especially with Ukraine, which is hugely emotionally.
So Epstein met with him.
So Epstein meets with him. I think it was in 2014. Maybe it was when he was out of office, or maybe just getting ready to depart. He had 1 million government positions. I think he was like a deputy State Department guy or something like that. And the claim was that Epstein met with him and they talked about. Basically, as he was entering his phase as a private citizen, what should he do with his finances? Something like that. That was the claim. But then he later becomes the CIA director, right? Oh. Which is obviously fodder for 1 million different theories. And look, I mean, I think William Burns should be scrutinized for his role as CIA director under Biden. I mean, he was up. Who knows what he was up to? But and I think I'm not sure how many meetings it was disclosed that they had. It was either at least 2, I think. Right. But okay, that's just like one dot, and then people want to connect it to mean he must have been an intelligence asset. And I'll get into the Aosta quote.
Yeah.
Because that's...
And then they'll tell us who Virginia Giuffre is. Is that her name?
God.
Tell us who she is.
Yeah.
Then I want to watch some videos. Go ahead.
Okay, I see Tim Dillon on the screen over there.
Yeah.
So this Aosta quote, right? It's become central to the folklore, especially on the internet, around Epstein. And it's amazing. Nobody, even these like vaunted Epstein researchers like Whitney, Webb, Daryl Cooper, a million others, they don't bother to really investigate substantively anyway, or with any degree of adequate sort of scrutiny, the provenance of the supposed quote. It appeared in one July 2019 article in the Daily Beast by this woman, Vicky Ward, who has her own problems in terms of credibility and how she's kind of embellished her role in this whole Epstein thing, which I don't even want to get into because it would derail the rest of the conversation. But she writes in this 2019 Daily Beast article that Aosta, who was at that point the labor secretary in the first Trump administration, but had been the U.S. attorney for the Southern District of Florida at the time that this federal non-prosecution agreement was negotiated with Epstein in 2007, 2008, he said Vicky Ward reports that she was told by a former senior White House official 2 or 3 years before that, so two or 3 years before 2019, during the Trump transition period, so after he won the 2016 election, I guess, that Vicky Ward reports that she was told by this former official that Aosta said that he had been told that Epstein, quote, belonged to intelligence and therefore to leave it alone or back off. So it's like quadruple hearsay. The source or the anonymous former senior White House official that told this to Vicky Ward is almost certainly Steve Bannon.
Okay.
Who's like a consummate bullshitter, essentially gossip monger, because he was collaborating with Vicky Ward around this time on a book trashing the Kushners. And if you recall from the first Trump administration, Jared Kushner was like the biggest rival of Steve Bannon.
Yeah, this is like court intrigue.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's that court gossip or whatever. And in other words, like the quote is like not at all meritorious in terms of the sourcing.
And they built a whole edifice on top of it.
Vicky Ward won't respond to me. I mean, I've tried to question her.
Moynihan told me, by the way, Nancy Rommelman is upset that you didn't call her back. Moynihan...
I will get back to her.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I've been getting a lot of podcast requests recently, but I will get back.
Moynihan told me that, Michael Moynihan, that Vicky Ward said somewhere that she didn't even believe that Epstein was CIA.
Yeah, I mean, she's all over the place.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows with her? Like, why won't she reply to my emails, Vicky?
So now let's just get to Martyr Maid for a second.
And then there was that OPR report, right?
Yeah.
Which contains the only known instance in which Alex Aosta was asked or addressed directly under oath and under penalty of perjury whether he knew Epstein to have been an intelligence asset at the time that this Florida non-prosecution agreement was negotiated. And again, under oath, under penalty of perjury, Aosta responds directly to the DOJ, who could prosecute him potentially.
Yes.
The answer is no. He didn't know this. Now, all these researchers and these online folklorists, they use that Vicky Ward like triple hearsay quote as the launch pad for their investigating frenetically these supposed intelligence ties, but they seemingly had no knowledge at all of this report that came out almost 5 years ago now, November of 2020, and that includes Whitney Webb, who didn't even know that it existed until I emailed her in August of this year. Seriously. And Martyr Maid, or whatever the hell we want to call him, Darryl Cooper, who also clearly didn't know that this report existed when he went on Tucker Carlson's podcast for this emergency Epstein education session, and
Okay, so
then
Darryl Cooper,
threw a hissy fit when I emailed him about it.
My erstwhile friend Darryl Cooper, he did a whole show with this guy Ryan Dawson.
Oh, please.
All about, and I just want to say, I wish I had it to cut in. They spend 25 minutes at the top of this show just bashing Israel and the Jews. Okay, I could not resist. Here is a few minutes of Darryl Cooper's deep dive into Epstein interview extravaganza with Holocaust denier Ryan Dawson. I also edited in for flavor a few of Ryan Dawson's other comments from other interviews, just so you get the full picture of who it is that Darryl Cooper has such esteem for.
If you get him going, I mean, he's been on this stuff for so long. If you really want to go deep, go subscribe to Ryan's Substack. Support what he does, and you don't have to agree with his tone on Israel. You don't have to agree.
What people have to understand, like Israel it's a country run by criminals, like absolutely psychotic criminals where they think God's a real estate agent and they just murder people. And Israel itself has thousands of sex slaves. They have brothels filled with young Eastern Europeans, a lot of Ukrainians recently, who were lured there. They take their passports away and they are in forced prostitution. So that means rape. They had organizations for human trafficking, like the good kind, where they would get Jewish refugees to Israel. So they had well-organized outfits to do this type of thing. But the war's over and those never went away. And they just went right into bringing in forced labor, forced sex slavery. And they don't care because they don't look at you as human beings. You're dumb goyim. And this is not like just organized crime. Like the state does this. It is organized by the state. The Israeli government had sex tourism rings. George Steinberg, Hebrew language teacher, they had little kids, like 8, 9 years old, websites of them nude. Hey, Israelis, come fuck a child.
They're satanic. You look at it. Child pedophilia, Jews. Pornography, Jews. Organ trafficking, Jews. Central banking, Jews. Lying about war, Jews. The neocons, Jews. Communists, Jews. Pick a fucking lie. There they are. It's them every time. And for no reason at all, they elected Adolf Hitler.
Okay, we'll talk about Epstein. We will. But you got to understand, Israel is a safe haven for pedophiles. Tel Aviv is full of them. Some of them commit crimes again and end up in jail there. But this is why they feel like it's safe to do. And the fact that you have a society with enough customers that you could have pamphlets for rape tourism, what does that say? Like, of course they kill kids. You're dealing with like demonic level evil.
But once you can get people to take a calm look at what evidence is available, the whole myth falls apart. And the reason it's important for me to say, well, who cares if it was 6 million or 1 million or 900,000, whatever, it's still wrong. But I'm not arguing about that. It's still wrong for people to starve to death or anything, but it was wrong on both sides. And without this extra kind of theatrical portion of the story, there's nothing to differentiate the Allies from the Axis powers.
I like that it's gotten to the point where now it's cool to talk about these psychopaths, because that means the needle's moved to a point where you kind of can criticize Israel now. You couldn't before at all, or you're a dirty anti-Semite.
Israel and the Jews,
Fine.
all to soften the ground for what is obviously the nucleus of their interest in this story, which is that Epstein is Jewish and related to Israel, and obviously this is, I think, also Thomas Massey's. This is the reason he's
I'm not sure about Massey.
Well,
although I'm disappointed with Massey. Let me just say,
yeah,
I'm a critic of Israel.
That's
I'm a critic
beside-
of
that's
U.S.
nothing to do with
but
this.
it's
Yeah.
important. I'm a critic of U.S. foreign policy, including in relation to Israel. However, my argument has been that this whole obsession with Epstein and sexual blackmail as the prism through which we all need to somehow view the U.S. relationship with Israel is a total distraction. You know, it drowns out what I think are necessary rational critiques of the U.S. relationship with Israel. And nobody wants to hear it because they'd rather get themselves tantalized by these nonsensical and I think largely, almost certainly fictitious sexual blackmail theories that stem from Epstein that aren't based on any credible evidence.
You know, Dave Smith doesn't really talk to me anymore.
Well, he's also full of shit.
But there was a certain just a practical happiness I get because I'm not anti-Israel. That people like Dave Smith, who I think does want to be an actual intellectual person.
Oh, please.
No, I think he does.
Enough of these failed comedians thinking that they're politically political intellectuals.
I think he got.
It's a scourge.
I think he got carried out to sea by the undertow. And the undertow was that these people like Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson, whatever it is.
Candace Owens, the intellectual leading light of our time.
And Darryl Cooper, who he didn't have the sense to break ranks from when he first started to see himself.
That's cowardly.
Now he's all out. Right. So I take.
Dave
Let
Smith
me make my point. So I take a cynical, practical, what's the word? Jesus Christ, I can't think of it. Anyway, satisfaction in the fact that by keeping his relationship with Candace Owens and Martyrmate and these vicious, he has discredited what might
I'll tell you what discredited him.
might be an anti-Israel position similar to yours, and
not similar.
now it's gotten dirtied by the fact that how are you going to trust these people when they can't even break from Nazis, right?
Let's leave the Nazis aside, okay? Not that I'm unwilling to discuss Nazism.
He took expediency. That was the word of right. It was expedient for him
but
to
here's
stay
what
with
he
these
did.
people. Yeah.
He went to the Turning Point USA conference, which is run by Charlie Kirk, who's now been assassinated. Okay, so that's bizarre. I don't even know how to deal with that. But he went. There was in July, like about a week or so after this DOJ FBI memo came out on July 6th, which announced there's no Epstein client list, there was no evidence of blackmail, there's nobody additionally to prosecute, etc. And then everybody went insane. And we had the summer of Epstein, as I lovingly call it, which is probably the best summer of my life, frankly. Like the summer of '69, the song.
Yeah.
Maybe I should make a song about it. I'll do an acoustic guitar rendition. But Dave Smith, and I wrote an article about this because it's just insane because people were sending it to me, right? So Dave Smith goes to this essentially normie Republican gathering for like the youth wing of the Republican Party. That's what Charlie Kirk, R.I.P., did run, and Dave Smith just says, oh, yeah, he states as fact that Donald Trump, the guy that all these people are venerating to the point of absurdity in every other circumstance, that Donald Trump just covered up for a mass child rapist ring.
I know.
Just based on what, Dave? What do you know that we don't? And it was insane. It was just defamatory. I'm the last person to rush to say, hold up, everyone, don't defame President Trump, because I don't even, I have a million critiques of Donald Trump, but seriously, you're going to now make the main critique that's popular on the internet being that he's a pedophile and that he's covering up a child rapist ring? At the DC press conference last week.
Thomas Massey said that too.
Thomas Massey. Okay. So I used to at least appreciate Thomas Massey because he would go against the grain. He's one of the very few Republicans who's not totally subservient to Trump. Trump has vowed to primary him in Kentucky for his next reelection in 2026. Mm-hmm. He's actually very knowledgeable in terms of legislative minutia. Mm-hmm. So he had been on the Rules Committee in the House. Most members of Congress, if you talk to them, don't even know anything about the Rules Committee. Thomas Massey does. And he's independent. He really is. So I had some admiration for Thomas Massey, as well as Ro Khanna, who I also know on some level. But they're the ones who ran this press conference last week in D.C. with Epstein survivors. And I was invited to attend by Ro Khanna's staff. So I had been in communication with Ro Khanna over Steve Bannon angle of all this, because Steve Bannon had these 15 or more hours of interview footage that he conducted with Jeffrey Epstein.
That he won't release.
He won't release. He won't claim why. He won't say why. He says, "Oh, it's for some documentary." But he said that in the past, and no documentary ever comes out. Who knows? It's very suspicious, and he's always very voluble in talking to the media, including to me in the past, but he won't talk about his Epstein footage, so that's strange. But I had talked to Ro Khanna about this, right? And so I got invited to this Epstein press conference. I went, right? His staff escorted me in. And then I asked a question to somebody, this guy, Bradley Edwards, who's the lawyer who represents this purported Epstein victims. Again, most of whom are fake. That sounds like a really controversial thing to say. I will substantiate it to the hilt. So I asked this question about Virginia Roberts Giuffre, right? Who's basically the central Epstein quote unquote victim. Without her, we're not talking about this right now. She's the one on whose behalf Bradley Edwards filed a motion in late 2014 called a motion for joinder related to this Crime Victims' Rights Act. It's too arcane to get into at the moment, but he, in this motion, that's where Virginia Roberts Giuffre introduces this whole theory of a mass child sex trafficking ring and also a blackmail operation. And she names Prince Andrew and Alan Dershowitz as two specific individuals to whom she claimed that she was sex trafficked as a minor. But then she also says there's this whole constellation of other prominent individuals that she generically gestures toward, like foreign prime ministers and so forth, by whom she was also
traffic
victimized.
just means like facilitated, right?
It means nothing.
I always thought of sex trafficking as somebody's kidnapped and they're transported somewhere. It just means that if I say Periel, I'm hooking you up with this dude and I bring you over there, that could be considered trafficking.
It means everything and nothing.
If I sell you Periel,
it means everything. Yeah. I guess I'm in the market. It means everything and nothing. It means like literally,
but it has to be a legal definition for it.
There is, but it's so amorphous. It's so nebulous.
Like racketeering, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, prosecutors love it because they can just define it however they want. So they tried to define it with Diddy, and then that case Diddy got acquitted because they couldn't establish that there was a real trafficking thing. It really just means like
doesn't it mean like across state lines though?
You think, but not necessarily. It's like just like somebody gets moved like you facilitate the ability for someone to move from point A to point B. That's what it means.
Now, what didn't Mike Johnson also say something like this?
Mike Johnson said a million
There's
things.
There's a definition here, though.
There's a federal statute, but I'm saying it's very adaptable.
Yeah,
Mike Johnson is also full of shit. So Mike Johnson tried to claim just a few days ago that Donald Trump was an FBI informant against Jeffrey Epstein. Then he walked that back. It's not true, or that's never been proven by any evidence. And Mike Johnson also stokes hysteria because you know what? This issue is so weird. It's like Mike Johnson's this big like evangelical Christian, right? And there's always been this like cross-ideological or cross-religious alliance between the evangelical Christians who are obsessed with trafficking stuff and then the feminists who also say we need to empower prosecutors to more vociferously prosecute so-called traffickers because I don't know, in the name of feminism or something. And that's how a lot of these
and they also want to make sex work legal. You know,
I don't know. Who the hell knows? It's
which should all be segregated from underage people, but
but it never gets segregated. You know why? So at this Epstein press conference, right, which I was at, and we could do a whole show on that, but it was insane. But they knowingly conflate women who are being presented to the public as Epstein survivors. That's the official title now. I don't know when survivor was the new word that was declared to be the one that we all had to repeat or repeat like it's some chant or platitude, but yeah. So they're all survivors, right? But like a multiple of the women who spoke at this thing, and they didn't clarify this when they spoke, right? Because it's being run live on CNN. I had a friend text me when I was thrown out. Wait, my mom just saw you on CNN. I'm like, wait, can you send me the clip?
Why were you thrown out?
I'll tell you why. So I asked a question to so many of these Epstein survivors were adults at the time that they claimed that they were victimized. So, women in their 20s. So we'll leave that aside for now. People can go to my Substack if they wanted more information. But I was thrown out because I was, notwithstanding that I had been invited by Ro Khanna, the co-organizer, along with Massey. I waited my turn to call on to ask a question, and I'm the only guy, of course, or gal, who would even have the slightest inclination to ask even a mildly critical question or skeptical question, even though you think that's what you would do at a press conference, right?
Of course.
But like nobody had the faintest notion to do that, naturally, including the other journalists who were like all against me. Even though I'm such a nice guy, I'm so humorous. That's why I'm at the comedy cellar. And so I asked of Bradley Edwards, who was like basically like commandeering the press conference. they Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie, like they stepped aside. First of all, neither of them know basic details about the Epstein case. Like they could not sit with you.
They know he's Jewish. I know. I don't want to say about Ro Khanna.
I don't know, but I don't.
But Thomas Massie.
I don't know. I don't buy that really.
Okay, let's see if Massie mentions this Mossad thing in the future. But go ahead.
The files exist. There are some files there. This is not a hoax. I don't think it implicates the president. I think it would be very embarrassing for the rich and powerful in this country and in other countries. Let's get it out there. This may even implicate some of our allies, some foreign intelligence, for instance, Israel. I am the only one who's got the spine to walk down there to the floor of the House and introduce this. The question is, why didn't 434 other members do this? And why are people reluctant to get this out now?
I'm not going to claim that I know.
No, you don't have to.
Yeah, I don't think that Massie is motivated by some Jewish thing. Okay, so but that said, I think he's gone off the deep end.
Israel thing. Well, the reason I think he is, just to spell, is because to get these MAGA types to break ranks with Donald Trump, there has to be something that is overwhelming the magnetic force between Trump and them. And the only thing I can think of that these people value more than their relationship with Trump is that has more weight with them is their hatred of Israel.
Okay, let's just bracket that. Let's just bracket that. Yeah,
you understand my point.
No,
right?
he has been
what else would
he's been targeted by AIPAC, et cetera, and other pro-Israel groups. Yes, that's true, and that probably does have some crossover to why he's now invested in the Epstein thing. But I think he's beclowning himself totally on the Epstein stuff. Yeah. Like he just says stuff that's wildly sort of, I don't know, just exaggerated. And, he's like sort of posturing as like somebody who's defending the survivors. And he's like saying, Republican men, why am I only the Republican male member of Congress who's supporting the Republican women? Because the people...
I mean, look at Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Yeah, Lauren Boebert and Nancy Mace.
Yeah, and Marjorie Taylor Greene was another one of the super MAGA people, one of the few of them, very anti-Israel.
Okay, so...
And now she's
relevant here, okay? So I asked my question, right? Yeah. My question is... Virginia Roberts Giuffre, whom Bradley Edwards, who I'm directing the question to, represented for years, she had to recant her claims against Alan Dershowitz in 2022 after accusing him for nearly a decade of having committed vile sex crimes against her as an underage girl. And she didn't just like vaguely accuse Alan Dershowitz, right? If you go and like read the court documents, the deposition transcripts, etc., she described in graphic, lurid detail.
She talked about a tumescent naked man who wouldn't shut up about Israel.
Well, maybe she should have. That would have been more amusing. But it wasn't that funny. What she really did do, which was that she said that there were at least 6 occasions on which she had been sexually victimized by Dershowitz as a minor, and she described it all in lurid, graphic detail, such as like his ejaculation habits. It was grotesque. And she was adamant that this happened to her, and then she recanted it. And Bradley Edwards was one of the lawyers representing her when she recanted it. So because at this press conference, and there was the press conference, and there was like a survivors rally that happened right before it, also out front in of the Capitol, where Virginia Roberts Giuffre is being hailed as though she was some martyr. This like truth-telling martyr, like she was a saint, like she's been beatified by the Catholic Church, or like it's like a civic or a secular beatification of her. And I'm sorry, there's hardly been anybody ever on earth who's been more of a proven chronic fabricator, and yet it was all being whitewashed. It was outrageous. So I asked Bradley Edwards about this, right? And then they cut me off. Like the survivors recognized me because I had tried to ask some of them questions before. And they're all like, murmuring amongst themselves. And they were telling Bradley Edwards, don't answer this guy. Don't answer this guy. And this guy said, we're not answering this question. And they cut me off, right? So I said, okay. I mean,
send me that video so I can put it.
I'll send it to you, yeah. And then so they move on from me. Bradley Edwards points out another journalist to have her ask a question. But then Ro Khanna interjects. He comes to the podium. He addresses my question. I asked Ro Khanna a follow-up. Next thing I know, Capitol Police are accosting me. And they're telling me I have to leave. I'm like, wait, hold on a second. What do you mean I have to leave? I'm an invited member of the press. I'm invited by Ro Khanna, who's running this press conference. I simply asked a question. And they say, no, you're going to be arrested if you don't come right now. So, okay, at that point I comply. I'm not going to defy the police. So they throw me out. And then people send me videos afterwards because I didn't have my eye on like every little thing here as it was going on in the moment. But then on the video, you clearly see Marjorie Taylor Greene, who as a member of Congress has jurisdiction over the Capitol Police. That the House of Representatives runs the Capitol Police. You could see her directing Capitol Police officers to throw him out, Get him out of here. Get him out. She's on video doing it. She's joining like this rabid mob of fake survivors.
But as a member of Congress, she doesn't have the.
No, she does.
She has authority.
Yeah, I mean,
435 people can order the police to do stuff.
I mean, if a member of the House of Representatives tells a Capitol Police officer to do something, they will do it.
They will, but it's a legal authority. It doesn't matter. I'm just.
Yeah, I mean, legally, the U.S. House of Representatives is the body
as a body, yes,
that controls the Capitol Police,
yes,
right?
yes.
So she, if she tells a police officer to do something, they will do it.
Okay.
So then I'm thrown out, right? And it was huge. I mean, it's because she and the so-called survivors did not like the content of my question. I wasn't disruptive. I wasn't a trespasser, and so it's a First Amendment thing. I don't know if I'm going to pursue it, but And so that's why I was.
How many of those women at the Survivor thing claim to have been underage victims of Jeffrey Epstein?
There were a handful. I mean, so you got to. That's one of the draws of this press conference was supposed to be that they were going to debut new survivors, right, who had never before given their quote unquote story, but they also trotted out other people who had been in the public record before. So, for example, there's this woman, Haley Robson. I think, based on what I can see in the video, she was like the ringleader in telling Bradley Edwards, don't answer this guy, and basically have him thrown out, because I did try to interview her before, and she talked to me briefly, but she's reported to have been, including like this woman, Julie K. Brown, who like wrote the Miami Herald series in 2018 that she says catalyzed the re-prosecution federally of Epstein and caused a huge sensation. It sort of tied Epstein into Me Too and so forth. She says that Haley Robson was like one of the main recruiters for Epstein in the Palm Beach phase and told girls to lie about their ages and say they were 18.
We're already out of time. We're going to get to two things. The suicide.
Yeah.
Now, as a matter of fact, you can look up, I'm in the Wall Street Journal for debunking something years ago about the study which claimed that Jeffrey Epstein did not commit suicide. Something about the breakage of his... And I don't even remember, but I actually looked into it at the time, and Toronto ran it in the Wall Street Journal. So actually, you could look that up. But at the time, I was very satisfied that there was no evidence that he was murdered.
So this might surprise you, right? So this is the one area where I'm less... the cane coming to pull me out.
You're just one of them. You're just a little bit less.
This is the one area where I'm less convinced that the... let's say conspiratorial theories are unfounded. Because, so Epstein's brother, Mark Epstein, he's alive. He was Epstein's next of kin when he died in August of 2019, because Epstein didn't have a spouse, didn't have children. So he was the one who was brought in to run his affairs once he was deceased. And he seems like a measured person to me. He makes a point to not make any claims that are beyond what he knows to be factual. And he's convinced that it's very unlikely that he committed suicide because of the injuries that he sustained.
Well, you're onto something there, because I just saw that Jussie Smollett's brother insists that Jussie Smollett actually was a victim.
Okay, I'm not claiming that Epstein didn't kill himself. Okay, I'm just saying my confidence interval is lower, and it doesn't have to be a Mossad conspiracy. It simply could have been that Epstein was perceived to have been at the time when he was in the federal jail facility in Manhattan to be the most notorious pedophile in American history. What happens to pedophiles when they're in prison? They get their ass kicked or killed. Okay? And so there was an inmate who was put into Epstein's cell as his cellmate for a while, who was known to be a very violent former corrupt cop who had been charged with murder, multiple murders. And when I was thinking about this, I sort of surmised that if that guy was known by the street, was revealed to the street gang that basically he was in, that he didn't kill Epstein, he would have gotten his own ass kicked. So
Michael,
I'm saying, I don't know for sure.
This is a very important point I'm going to make, in my opinion. You're doing now exactly what you're faulting others for doing on different matters. In other words, you're creating a plausible narrative without evidence.
I'm giving you evidence.
No, there's no. The evidence says we see the video for which we have all the various people who were there. He was on suicide watch. There was the autopsy. He
wasn't on suicide watch at the time that he died.
No, he had been. Meaning that it's not outrageous that he would commit suicide.
But he claimed he didn't try to commit suicide. He claimed he was attacked. You got to go read the DOJ Inspector General report from 2023, which, of course, Dal Cooper didn't read.
Okay.
Where it says that Epstein claimed when he was put on suicide watch that he actually did not attempt to commit suicide, but he was attacked.
And then we have all that video of the door. And I know there's some problems because there's a reset in a minute.
Is not right.
But you can see it's hard to imagine, even with that angle, that some murderer came in.
I don't know. I'm just saying
Scuffled.
it's
he was a
unclear to me.
fit guy.
It's
There would have
unclear
to
to
be
me.
noise. He would have to pay off the guards. He would have to get out. He would have to do it all
Well,
in that
he didn't have money to pay off the guards?
Yeah, the most plausible theory that I could find myself believing is that he paid the guards to look the other way
It could
while
have
he
been a
killed himself.
lower level, almost banal thing. It didn't have to be some.
No,
massive
he could have committed.
espionage
He could have
murder.
committed suicide with the guards paid
Right.
to look the other way.
Dershowitz says this.
Except
Dershowitz says
did
that
Well, then I take it back. No, but
Dershowitz says that he thinks that if Epstein did commit suicide, it would have to have been with the assistance of the prison staff. Is that so crazy?
it's not so crazy. Except then the question is, well, how did he get the money? Like, how did he?
He had a commissary.
Well, unless he has real cash with him, and
No, inmates can fill their accounts with money. That's how they get like food and whatever.
right, but then he's got to give the money to somebody.
I'm just saying. Okay,
yeah.
I'm not asserting that I know conclusively one way or another.
Okay, let's
I'm
watch.
saying I'm less conclusive.
Let's conclude. And I know you probably hate Bill Barr, but Bill Barr.
No, I was a founding member of the Bill Barr fan club in 2019 when he was going after Robert Mueller. So the Mueller report.
Bill Barr was 100% sure, and then you have.
I don't think he said 100% sure. I read his book.
He said 100% sure, and then all
right,
you have what's his name, Dan Bongino and
please.
Patel. No, which is
two of the least credible people on earth, especially Bongino.
Except that they were all in on it. It's humiliating. Like everybody who's actually looked at it has come, except for the one medical examiner who also said that OJ couldn't have possibly killed Nicole Brown Simpson.
Well,
he's the only one. Let's watch. Can you start it at the beginning of the
it's
video?
when you actually create problems, not when you're just a part of the right.
Yeah, and full screen it. Yeah, and then this will be it. We got to go because I have somebody waiting for me downstairs. Go ahead. Or if you can't full screen it, it's okay as long as we can hear it. It's fine. It's fine. Just press play. Okay.
What's Whitney Webb's take on this?
I bet she's probably, Whitney's research is so unbelievable.
Oh, but by the way, I should say,
Yeah.
before I go any further than that,
Yeah.
Whitney Webb has some strange conspiracy that she believes someone's trying to keep her from being on my show.
Interesting.
Yeah, Whitney, I'll have you on the show. I just haven't reached out because I have thousands of people to go through. That's
He's
all
busy.
it is. I would definitely do it, though.
We've had Whitney on a bunch.
The idea that I wouldn't do it is incorrect, and I apologize.
She's an enormously
autistic?
Well, there's a lot of this. She talks like this a lot, and she's just the pentameter of her voice is very like this. And she goes,
she knows a lot.
She knows a lot about things. She goes, Jeffrey Epstein on the third day in January 1996, he met with this guy. You know, like, but she
with no notes, no notes. She's off
she
the
just
top of the
goes.
head. Yeah,
but she's really enormously amazing at research.
Mm-hmm.
She's an amazing researcher. She has compiled the data.
Yeah, no,
You know?
she definitely has. And how they kill all those people in Germany? Nobody's whacked her yet.
She's somewhere in South America, I think.
Good move.
Yeah, smart.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
But, I mean, how much resources does she have to protect herself down there?
One of the reasons I think people like her end up being safe is she writes these very big, very studious books that no one in America reads.
That's true. Where no one, it's not a threat.
It's not a
because
threat.
it doesn't go mainstream.
It's not a threat. Now, these big Hollywood types that go, I'm going to blow the whistle on whatever the hell's going on. They go, bye-bye. You know what I mean? Or a mainstream journalist who's like, I'm going to write an article about something and, it's going to lead to a congressional investigation.
Yeah.
This is almost over. I realize this is
when you
this wasn't the clip that I wanted. Just tell us about Whitney Webb, and then we'll go.
Tim, Joe, please. Tim, Dylan, you're one of the very few comedians I have ever found funny. I am so fed up with all these failed comedians who now think that they need to have a political podcast, but you are actually funny. Whitney Webb is a fantasist. She's a charlatan. She doesn't engage with rational criticism. She just does this spurious dot connecting thing where she's like a motor mouth, where she'll throw out just an avalanche of seemingly plausible facts and then just like invite everybody to draw the most salacious possible inference. She makes up some of those facts. Like I found out because everybody was bombarding me with demands that I needed to look into Whitney Webb. I was a huge coward if I did not engage with Whitney Webb's work. So finally I said, fine, I'll do it. And so like the first I read some of her atrocious book, One Nation Under Blackmail, which is like ridiculously idiotic.
Oh, she's the one who wrote the 2 volumes.
Yeah, they say it's a 2-volume book, but I don't know. It's just the same book essentially, and it's just a whole, it's just a load of crap. And they say, "Oh, it's this amazing research." Okay, like what research is amazing, Tim? Like, spell it out for us. Give us a concrete example of what research you find amazing, because I don't find any of her research amazing. And in fact, her research methodology is like beyond dubious, because she doesn't like bother to double check anything. That Vicky Ward quote we were talking about with Aosta, she cites that in her book, like on the literal first page, as her whole impetus for investigating these like intelligence ties or blackmail ties regarding Epstein. And she clearly did not ever investigate the provenance or reliability of that quote. She just like wanted to confirm her bias. She made up on Brianna Joy Gray's podcast this idea that Donald Trump, in concert potentially with Jeffrey Epstein, had a guy murdered in prison. So to make sure that this guy could not incriminate Trump in a child sex trafficking operation, it was just made up. The guy didn't even die in prison.
This is unfortunately the way a lot of people operate. This is the way the people who claim that Russiagate was real were operating. Yeah. This is the way you don't have to. This is the way a lot of people like Scott Horton operate when it comes to the whole Ukraine-Russia thing and their claims about, the West organized a coup in Ukraine and Maidan and. Victoria Nuland and all that stuff. It's not about whether these things can or can't be true. It's that they'll take some quote from somewhere. They won't tell us at all, give us any idea about how reliable it is or isn't. They will, just as with this professional responsibility, an Office of Professional Responsibility report,
DOJ,
they will keep from us on purpose any
No, they weren't even aware of it.
Yes.
They're so cloistered and myopic that they literally are not even aware of any countervailing evidence.
That's what, for instance, so that's what they do, like with this, we're going to end now, but like this Nuland, this hugely significant Nuland phone call that the Kremlin, Putin released.
Okay, but Whitney Webb also just makes stuff up. It's not that she even just spuriously connects facts. She also makes up facts, and so does Daryl Cooper, who's a giant crybaby.
What they all do is leave out contrary evidence.
Right.
And
they're not doing legitimate research. So when they hail her supposedly like unparalleled research abilities, it's a total crock.
They're not journalists. All right, but Michael Tracey is a journalist. I believe that you will be... I believe that you'll be vindicated here, except on your incautious openness to the idea that Epstein actually killed himself.
I call it epistemic humility.
Epistemic humility. Okay. And we're very happy to have you. You should become a regular guest because
let's do it.
We have a lot. We should argue about Israel. We'll see what happens, and then that'll be the last time you're.
You already got me in trouble. Now you want to argue about Israel.
So we're gonna go. Periel, you have any?
No, I would like for him to come back and discuss.
As a woman, were you offended by anything tonight?
Just your positions on Israel.
No, she's the wrong.
When I went to Israel for the first time ever after October 7th, I had Israelis running up to me, congratulating me for making Aliyah because they assumed that I was Jewish.
Well, what's his name? Arthur Kwan Lee. You know who he is? He's
name rings a bell.
The artist, the anti-Semitic artist who did Daryl Cooper's logo.
Oh yeah, you sent me something about that. Yeah, who the hell knows?
But he put a picture of you, and he assumed you were Jewish, and he made a remark about it. I was look at him like
I missed this. You got to send. I always tell people who assume I'm Jewish and like try to impute something nefarious to me on that basis. I tell them I'm honored. I wish I was Jewish because my IQ would be a few points higher.
At least. All right, so thank you, Michael. Remember to call Nancy Rommelman back. Steve, any comments, Steve? Steve Wall behind?
I think we covered it.
I think you're covered. Okay, good night, everybody.
Good night.